In the meantime, as history has taught us, the left love to indoctrinate the young. Yes, they have great plans for your children. Instead of teaching kids the truth, that Australia is a successful liberal democracy, activists masquerading as educators will insist on a national education curriculum that holds our country's history as synonymous with racism, genocide, sexism, hegemony, da-da-da. But as the Sydney Morning Herald reported this week, their plans have had a massive setback.
The paper reported a revised national curriculum will elevate the study of Western and Christian heritage in history, remove references to the Anzac legend as contested, cement the importance of phonics in teaching reading, and reverse changes to maths that left experts worried the subject was being dumbed down.
The paper went on to say that, quote, references to Christian heritage have been restored after anger over the original decision to use the word multi-faith and omit references to Christianity. It continued, saying students will learn how the country's secular democracy draws upon our Christian and Western heritage and diverse cultural origins.
But why did the original draft curriculum dispense with these topics in the first place? Because obviously it was written by ideologues, not educators. And if it hadn't been for the Institute of Public Affairs, you should check them out, ipa.org.au, and the conservative media, including this show, very much so, they would have succeeded in implementing this revisionist dogma.
Proposals want to add even more Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander history so that it threatens to swamp every subject and become a monoculture.
It's giving licence for climate change activism in schools.
They've taken out any references to Christianity, they've taken out references to ancient Greece, and they've taken out references to our freedoms coming about as a result of Western civilization.
And naturally, any suggestion that our society owes its success to Western civilization is highly offensive to the workers of the ABC Soviet. ABC Melbourne presenter Virginia Trioli on Friday.
And yes, as anticipated and as flagged by the government itself, Western history is to be elevated. We were just talking yesterday on the program about the old-style history wars. Don't tell me this is it returning again. Well, it makes me think that we are now about to start again another version of the history wars, because when people wrap themselves up in the legend of Anzac, you're starting to talk about something that is seen as untouchable.
Don't you just love how these instinctive accusations by the left of history wars, whenever a conservative, whom the ABC finds anathema, calls out their shenanigans? When then Education Minister Alan Tudge tried to explain the government's case on the ABC last year, he was treated with outright hostility.
Instead, it's presented as a contested idea. Right? Anzac Day is not a contested idea apart from an absolute fringe element in our society. So that's just one example. The word contested itself is used 19 times throughout the curriculum. The Year 7 to 10 history doesn't even mention Captain James Cook, a pretty significant person in the history of the world and particularly significant for Australia. Not mentioned. One of the greatest egalitarian free countries in the world.
Minister, to jump in there, I am keen to get your thoughts on this because, you know, a lot of people, just to jump in, a lot of people, Minister, would probably disagree with some of those things.
I would ask you, name me a single country in the world at any time in the world's history which is not as free and as egalitarian as Australia is today.
Minister, I don't think that's the concern here.
Wealthy, liberal, free, egalitarian society. What has created that?
Haven't we learned about that? Don't kids learn about that in the curriculum?
Let me finish, because if you don't understand that deeply, then you're not going to protect it.
Well, that's appalling, Alan Tudge. As we all know, the great truths about Australia's history are to be found in fairy tale books like Bruce Pascoe's Dark Emu. Ironically, that same program inadvertently vindicated Alan Tudge. See if you can pick up the doozy in this little excerpt.
History should reflect accuracy, and that First Nations people and how they've been treated post-colonisation may not be reflected properly in the curriculum and should be taught accurately to Australia.
We're not there just to fly the Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander flag. We're there to make sure that the curriculum is very balanced.
That's Professor Mark Rose explaining the role of ACARA's Indigenous Advisory Committee that he chairs. He's of Gunditjmara heritage and has questioned why the minister has taken such issue with the proposed curriculum. He says the changes aren't about removing or making any part of our nation's history less than others, but presenting all sides of history.
It was as recent as 1967 that we actually became citizens of this country. And what can we put in place to make sure that never, ever returns to that?
You heard that correctly. The chair of the Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority's Indigenous Advisory Committee claims Indigenous people did not become Australian citizens until the 1967 referendum. How many times have we heard this nonsense? Indigenous people were in fact granted the right to vote several years prior to the 1967 referendum, and the ABC itself even admitted 4 years ago that the claim that Indigenous people were classified as flora and fauna is a furphy. Needless to say, the ABC host did not correct Professor Rose's false assertion.
And reacting to the news on Friday about the revised curriculum, Wendy Harmer, who has just stepped down as the host of ABC Breakfast Sydney, tweeted in typical melodramatic fashion, "What was that about the culture wars being put front and centre in the forthcoming election? Here we go."
Well, every time you hear someone from the ABC rant about conservatives fighting a history war or a culture war, just remember they're carrying on an old tactic beloved of the left. Accuse the other side of that of which you are guilty.